We're nearing the end of 2021, so I'm doing something a little different this time. It may seem unexpected that I'm doing a video on one of the latest keyboards from Casio, the Casiotone CT-S400. But those who know me are familiar with my appreciation for the Casiotones going all the way back to the early 80s. For a generation like mine, born in the 70s, keyboards like the affordable and portable Casios and Yamaha Portasounds were often a gateway to bigger things to come. And I still love the Casiotones, not in an ironic or kitschy way, but genuinely for what they are. I've said before that the 1984 MT400V, the one with the filter, was my first real synth. And over the years, I've held on to or collected a few others, and I occasionally incorporate them into my music. But one thing that often bugged me about Casiotones was that the ones that really stood out always seemed to be missing some feature that would make it feel more complete. Sometimes the feature was included on another model, released around the same time, but it would be missing on something else. One might have basic recording, but no way to balance the mix between the rhythms and the melody. Another might have an arpeggiator, but not the auto accompaniment. And as the 80s progressed, Casio drifted from the consonant vowel synthesis for its sounds towards other methods that I felt lacked character. And even the Casiotone name started disappearing. So I was pleased when Casio revived the Casiotone brand as it approached its 40th anniversary. But I really took notice this year when Casio announced the lovingly designed CT-S1, and I was even more intrigued by the CT-S400. Both have 61 full-size keys, operate on batteries, and have Casio's latest generation of stereo speakers. The CT-S1 is arguably the more minimal approach with only a few buttons, no display, and an emphasis on style, feel, and quality sound. I got the white one this past summer, and it's classy and punches far above its weight, partly because it's so light. It's more than worthy successor to the original Casiotone 201 from 1980. The CTS 400, on the other hand, promised to be more like the later Casiotones, with drums and rhythms, auto accompaniment, and even the oft-derided Casio chord feature. With its pitch bender wheel, it reminded me of the mid-80s MIDI-enabled CT-6000 that I never got around to getting because I'd moved on to the CZ synthesizers. So here it is, 35 years later. I'm obviously surrounded by some serious gear, but sometimes I just like to jam wherever I am. I don't always want to tweak a tone to perfection, navigate through deep menus, or come up with my own rhythms. I just want to kick back and instantly make music for myself without worrying about the connections, firmware updates, moving stuff around, all that. So I couldn't resist ordering the CTS 400 as well, partly in the hopes that my Casiotone Curse would finally be lifted. Would I finally get my perfect Casiotone? The answer is yes. The CTS 400 turned out to be everything the teenager in me always wanted out of a Casiotone. That's not to say that it's a keyboard for kids, because I've found it very engaging despite being... The S400 arrived in August, but I only recently had a chance to finally unbox it because so much has been going on with the Jupiters lately. So, let's take a look. When you start the S400, you're on the home screen and in tone mode. There are two other modes: rhythm for drums and accompaniment, and song to play preset or user recordings. You can return home at any time and even customize this with your personal setup as a startup option. Under the display, 5 buttons correspond to mode-specific functions in the display. So in tone mode, you'll see that the menu changes as soon as you start changing the dial. You can navigate through tones this way or skip through category. I can easily layer a second tone by tapping the Layer button and navigating to a new tone. Even with these two layered, I can add another tone as a split in the lower keys. So now I've got something for bass on the lower and strings on the upper. I can change the default split point by holding down split and adjust the relative octaves of each of these parts by holding down layer. I can assign an arpeggio to the setup and specify that it's only for the lower part. I also set it to hold so that it doesn't stop when I lift my fingers. At any time, I can go to the menu and into the balance mixer to adjust the parts relative to each other. Now let's add a beat. For that, we'll go to Rhythm mode. You can audition and select the preset rhythms as you did tones. You'll see the display change with the context and rhythm-specific choices for the buttons. Each rhythm has two variations of patterns, fill-in, and intro options. Adjust tempo by tapping the tempo button and adjusting with the dial. Accompaniment is where you can engage features like the Casio chord and auto harmonize, but I'm not going to use that here. More important for me is to set up the sync start so that a single tap of the first note starts the performance. I'll set it to begin with an intro and transition to variation 1. And I'll turn my arpeggio back on. And here's a performance using all the settings I've made so far. System effects and EQ are available if you need to tweak the performance. Once you have it all set up, you can save the entire combination of selections and settings as a song registration for easy recall at a later time. And if you want, you can record your performance to later playback and even perform on top of that. Now, this may have looked a little overwhelming, but I managed to get the hang of all this in just a few hours one evening. I can see all sorts of possibilities, using the S400 as a sketch pad for future pieces, recording it into a DAW, possibly using it as a controller for external gear assigned to those parts. But most of all, it sounds excellent, and it's just a lot of fun to play on its own. It has all the flexibility that I always wanted out of a Casiotone, and the S400 does a lot more than I expected. So what's good? There are over 600 tones, and for the most part, they sound terrific, especially with the surround feature. I'm particularly fond of the over 100 synth tones that they included. The clean look and accessible controls make it very appealing. The menu system is so navigable that you barely need to look beyond the quick start manual. There are a few clever features like holding down the rhythm button to bring up a recommended matching tone. The feel and the response of the keyboard are surprisingly good for a keyboard at this price. It feels better than some synths I've bought at over $1,000. The 5-track record feature with mixing and overdub is fantastic and easy to use and save songs. Creating layers and splits is really easy, and I think that a lot of pricier gear could take some lessons from it. And at just under £10 for a 61-key keyboard with speakers, it is stunningly light and portable. You can even add a guitar strap without breaking your neck. What's not so good? I wish the USB MIDI implementation was a bit more straightforward and accessible. It's documented and it works, but it requires some knowledge and patience that probably exceeds the target audience. The 200 rhythm beats sound great, but they seem a bit dated. It's a broad and even international selection, but I would have liked to have heard a dozen or so more modern rhythms. I wish we could name registrations. Having a specific song in Bank 3, Slot 2 means I better keep a notebook handy. Considering the multi-track capabilities, I thought it was strange to only provide 48 voices of polyphony, especially compared to the relatively simple CT-S1 with 64. On the other hand, I really haven't run into voice stealing yet, even on those tracks with both layers and a split, so perhaps it's a non-issue. Finally, speaking of the CT-S1, if there's one thing a CT-S400 owner will be jealous of, it's the variety of color choices available for the S1. Unfortunately, the S400 is only available in black. It looks slick, but it's a great overall design and perhaps deserved a few more choices to shine. Neither good nor bad, but worth noting, the S400 includes a friendly 4-page quick start and a much more extensive user manual at over 200 pages. The latter is written in a rather clinical fashion. Still, complete documentation is to be commended, especially for an entry-level keyboard. Like the MIDI and the documentation, I consider several features beyond entry-level in the S400. There are some practical system effects like reverb, delay, chorus, flanger, and an impressive selection of 100 arpeggios can be selectively assigned to layers or split. In other words, I think that there is a great deal of depth that can be explored for quite some time. There's also an $80 WU-BT10 wireless adapter from Casio. It's excellent for streaming in external music or sending MIDI out, but not so good for MIDI in, which works much better over straight USB. It's also useful with the free Cordana Play app for smartphones. Cordana includes a music player and an app for piano lessons, but I would have liked to have seen more control functionality for configuring the keyboard without the menu. As is, the WU-BT10 is a pricey option with limited features, but I appreciate that it helped keep the price of the keyboard down to a street price as low as $200. By the way, the CT-S400 and the recently released CT-S410 are identical keyboards. As far as I know, it's just a regional or marketing distinction. I'll wrap up by saying that this is in no way a complete review of the new Casiotones. There are several recent reviews out there to check out. I'm more of a synth guy who just happens to be a fan of the Casiotone legacy. Entry-level and arranger-type keyboards have an audience that know much more about how the 400 compares to others like the Yamaha PSRs, Casio's own CTX series, and Chord keyboards. If you're interested in more demos and advice about those, check out channels by Jeremy C., Gearfax, and others. And I know that many musicians turn up their noses at instruments like this, and that's fine. But if you're open-minded and looking for a fun and affordable keyboard for around $200, one that's lightweight and feels and sounds better than you might expect it to, keep an eye on Casio. They seem to have some new energy and ideas in their products, and it'll be interesting to see where they go from here. For now, this Casiotone will be joining my permanent collection amongst the best of them. It definitely makes music fun anytime, anywhere. Thanks for watching, and until next time, be seeing you.